Ladies and gentlemen, they won't miss you when you're always there. They'll miss you when your silence says what your presence never had to. When the calls stop getting answered, when your energy is no longer theirs to borrow, that's when they'll feel it. But this isn't about them. It's about you, finally realizing that being unforgettable isn't about being available. It's about becoming so powerful in your absence that they have no choice but to remember your presence. Stay with me. People will start missing you when they realize what your presence really meant, when your absence disrupts the rhythm they took for granted. It's not when you're sitting in front of them every day, showing up, giving your time, energy, or loyalty. No, people start missing you when the comfort you provided becomes uncomfortable by its disappearance, when the quiet you carried starts to sound like a void, when your silence is louder than your voice ever was. That's when it hits them. And you're not here to live your life waiting for that moment. You don't become memorable by demanding attention. You become unforgettable by standing tall in your own principles, regardless of who notices. It's easy to get caught in the noise, the distractions, the comparisons, the constant chase for validation. But understand this, people are only capable of missing something once they've learned what it means to be without it. That lesson? That doesn't always come with applause or recognition. It often comes in your absence. Do people miss you? That's not the question you should be asking. The real question is, what are they missing? Are they missing the person who always said yes, even when you were drowning in your own responsibilities? Are they missing the one who carried everyone's weight but had no one to lean on? Or are they missing someone who held boundaries, showed strength, and walked away when enough was enough? You get to decide which version of you becomes irreplaceable. We live in a world obsessed with being seen, likes, follows, notifications, constant proof that you matter. But real value, true worth, doesn't need an audience. You know your value not by how loudly the world responds to you, but by how you hold yourself when no one claps. You know who you are when you can walk away from a room, a person, a situation and say, I showed up with integrity, and that's enough. Let them miss that. Let them miss the consistency you gave without needing credit. Let them sit with the echo of your loyalty. Let them miss the conversations you carried, the support you gave, the truth you told even when it wasn't easy. Let them remember that you showed up when it was raining, not just when the sun was out. But don't sit around waiting for that moment, because too many people waste their lives trying to be missed instead of being impactful. They shrink to fit in, say what others want to hear, and exhaust themselves keeping peace that was never theirs to keep. And then they wonder why their absence doesn't make noise. It doesn't make noise because your presence was quieted before you ever left. You want to be missed? Be bold in your honesty. Be sharp in your discipline. Be so consistent in your character that when you're no longer around, people feel it in the cracks of their daily routine. Make it undeniable that you were the one who always kept the standard high. Not because you were trying to prove something, but because that's just who you are. But again, don't confuse being missed with being loved. Some people will miss you, but only because you were useful to them. Others will miss you because you gave them access they didn't earn. Some will miss you because you made life easier for them while it became harder for you. That's not love, that's convenience. And when you start to evolve, when you start to elevate, you'll notice something. The silence grows louder. Fewer people check in. The phone rings less. Why? Because you're no longer feeding what drained you. You're not available in the same way. You're not catering to their comfort. You're not giving parts of yourself away for cheap. And that's when the right kind of people start to miss you. The ones who saw your depth. The ones who valued your presence without needing you to perform. The ones who respected your time, your mind, your boundaries. They're not the loud ones. They're not always the most visible, but they notice. They miss the substance in you, not just the service. You don't build that kind of impact overnight. You build it by showing up every day with a mindset rooted in discipline, resilience, and self-respect. You don't do it for attention. You do it because that's what strong people do. You do it because when the world shakes, you don't. You do it because being grounded in your own identity is the greatest force multiplier you will ever carry. So ask yourself, are you building a life that leaves a mark? Are you creating habits, relationships, moments that are real? Or are you curating a version of yourself to be palatable, easy, agreeable? just to be liked. Because likable is forgettable. Authentic is memorable. And yes, being authentic costs you something. It costs you comfort. It costs you some relationships. It costs you the illusion of control. But what you gain? Clarity, peace, power, and a legacy that doesn't need to scream to be remembered. You walk into a room differently when you know who you are. You stop performing. You stop begging. You stop shrinking. And eventually, people notice. Some will try to pull you back into the version of yourself they were comfortable with. Don't go. Others will stay silent, watching, unsure how to handle your strength. Let them. And the ones who truly get it, they'll miss you in the way that matters. But again, that's not your mission. You're not here to make people miss you. You're here to make your time count. You're here to live a life where your actions speak louder than their silence, where your growth becomes the loudest message you'll ever send, where your standards, not your suffering, define you. So keep walking, keep rising, keep building. Let the absence speak. Let the silence remind them. Let the space you leave behind say everything you never had to. And whether they miss you or not, you already know the truth. So, you were never meant to stay small just so others could stay comfortable. You were never meant to stay small just so others could stay comfortable. And once you understand that, really understand it, you stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop shrinking your ambition, your voice, your power to accommodate the insecurities of others. You stop making excuses for your excellence, and you start honoring the work it took to become this version of yourself. You didn't get here by accident. The strength you carry? That was forged in silence, in discipline, in the hours no one saw, in the sacrifices no one applauded. You became sharp not by chance, but by choice. Every time you chose to keep going instead of giving up, every time you told the truth when it would have been easier to lie, every time you stood alone rather than follow the crowd, that's when the real foundation was built. And now you owe it to yourself not to pretend like you didn't earn it. When people start missing you, it's rarely because they told you how much you meant when you were right there in front of them. No. They miss the calm in your presence, the fire in your drive, the way you carried your pain without making it anyone else's burden. They remember the steadiness you brought into chaos, the way you showed up without needing applause. But they remember it after, when the silence you leave behind echoes louder than the noise they once prioritized. That's the paradox of presence. When you're consistent, you're often invisible. When you're loyal, you're expected. When you're strong, you're relied upon but rarely asked, "How are you doing?" So here's a truth most won't say out loud. Your strength makes people comfortable until it doesn't serve them anymore. And when you decide to stop giving it away for free, when you set the boundary, when you say no, when you choose peace over proving, they'll feel it. They might even resent it, and eventually, they'll miss it. Let them. Because you were never meant to stay in the same place, surrounded by people who only value you when you're useful. Your presence should be powerful enough that when it's gone, the entire room shifts. Not because you demanded it, not because you raised your voice, but because the energy you brought in was real. The way you held space was authentic. And the example you set just by existing at a high standard, that's not something people forget. But understand this too. Being missed isn't the goal. It's a byproduct of living with integrity. It's what happens when you hold yourself to a higher code, when you choose growth even when it's lonely, when you choose truth even when it's costly. The aim is not to disappear and wait for recognition. The aim is to become so aligned with who you really are that the world adjusts or fades. Not everyone will come with you. Not everyone can. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with letting go of connections that were built on the version of you that tolerated too much. You have to be okay with walking away from environments where your worth was up for debate. Because staying small to be accepted is betrayal, not just of yourself, but of the people you were meant to impact by being fully you. There's power in being missed, but there's even more power in knowing you don't need to be. Because once you stop chasing approval, you start attracting respect. Once you stop explaining yourself, you start commanding space. And once you stop waiting for people to recognize your value, you realize that you were the one who needed to see it all along. Let them miss the discipline. Let them miss the late-night conversations, the no-judgment listening, the reliability they depended on but never appreciated. Let them miss the way you always kept your word, the way you remembered the little things, the way you never showed up halfway. Let them miss the quiet strength you carried, the kind that made them feel safe even when you were breaking inside. But while they sit in that space, don't look back. Because you have things to build. You have places to go. You have a version of yourself waiting at the next level who doesn't tolerate breadcrumbs, who doesn't beg to be chosen, who doesn't measure her value based on how many people miss her when she's gone. You were built for more. And more doesn't mean louder. It doesn't mean posting more, proving more, shouting louder into the void. It means becoming so grounded in your purpose that you stop performing entirely, that you no longer ask, "Do they see me?" and instead ask, "Am I being honest with myself?" Because that's what legacy is built on. Not on noise, but on depth. Not on popularity, but on presence. And the kind of presence that leaves a lasting mark, that doesn't come from trying to be liked. It comes from doing the hard things, telling the truth, holding the line, walking away when your peace is at risk. And people will notice, maybe not right away, maybe not in words, but they'll feel it. They'll feel the absence of the one person who held things together without demanding attention. They'll feel the difference between your energy and the noise they replaced it with. They'll realize that not all company is equal, not all friendships are deep, and not all presence is powerful. But by then, you'll be gone. Not gone in anger, not gone to make a statement, just gone because you outgrew it, because you stopped trying to pour into people who were never thirsty for anything but control, because you chose to reinvest in yourself, in your peace, in your purpose. That kind of exit? It leaves an imprint. You don't need to slam the door. You just need to stop opening it. You don't need to explain your worth. You just need to live it. And when people circle back, as they often do, looking for the version of you they once had access to, they won't find her. They'll find someone sharper, stronger, calmer, someone who no longer trades presence for permission. And that's the evolution they'll miss most, not just who you were, but who you refused to stay. So stand tall in that shift. Let your presence become sacred. Protect it, sharpen it, honor it, because when you move like you matter, the world adjusts accordingly. And yes, there will be moments when the silence feels uncomfortable, when you wonder if anyone noticed that you stopped reaching out, stopped explaining, stopped performing. That's normal. It's the residue of years spent overextending. But stay the course, because the people meant to meet you at this level will feel your absence in all the right ways, and they'll come correct, or not at all. You don't owe anyone the version of you who watered yourself down to be digestible. You owe you the version who finally realized not everyone is supposed to have access, not everyone is meant to understand, not everyone is capable of appreciating what they never had to earn. And that's the point. You weren't made to be convenient. You were made to be clear, to stand in truth, to walk with intention. And when that kind of energy disappears, it leaves a void no substitute can fill. Let them feel it. Let them feel it. Let them feel the absence of the one who never asked for anything but gave everything. Let them feel the loss of someone who never made a scene, who never demanded credit, but who held it all together from behind the curtain. Let them sit in the weight of silence where your consistency used to be, because for too long you carried others while dragging your own dreams behind you, thinking one day they'd notice, they'd thank you, they'd step up. But now you know better. You were never supposed to be their emotional safety net, their backup plan, or their silent audience. You were supposed to live. You were supposed to grow, to evolve, to break patterns that kept generations stuck. You were supposed to break the cycle, not become part of it just to keep others comfortable. So when you stop showing up the way they expect, when you stop answering every call, solving every crisis, giving more than you receive, don't be surprised when their confusion sounds like blame. Don't be surprised when they say you've changed like it's an accusation. Of course you've changed. Growth is change. Healing is change. Self-respect is change. And people who benefited from your brokenness will always resist your healing. Let them. Because you're not living for validation anymore. You're not trying to prove your worth by being needed. You've outgrown the idea that love must be earned through self-sacrifice. You've seen what happens when you make yourself small for too long. You disappear. Not to the world, but to yourself. You forget your own voice. You silence your own needs. You lose yourself in the role of caretaker, fixer, peacekeeper. But not anymore. Now you're reclaiming your voice, your space, your time. Now you're making decisions that serve your future, not just your history. You're building a life that doesn't revolve around being missed. It revolves around being aligned. And that alignment, that comes at a cost. It costs comfort, familiarity. It costs relationships you thought would last forever. But what it gives you is peace, power, freedom. And those things don't ask for permission. You may walk away quietly, but your absence will speak volumes. Not out of revenge, not out of bitterness, but because the energy you carried was never ordinary. It was never replaceable. The way you listened, the way you gave, the way you saw people before they saw themselves, that's not common. That's not easy to replicate. They'll realize it when conversations feel empty, when advice feels generic, when support feels performative. They'll search for your energy in other people and come up empty. And by then, you'll be somewhere else, somewhere higher, not because you ran from them, but because you finally ran toward yourself. You see, the goal isn't to be missed. The goal is to no longer need to be. It's to build a life so full, so grounded, so purpose-driven that the opinions of others become background noise. You're not here to be everyone's favorite. You're here to be real, to live with intention, to show others what it looks like to choose yourself without shame. And here's the hard truth. Not everyone will applaud that. Some will misunderstand. Some will take it personally. Some will say you're selfish, cold, distant. That's fine. Let them say what they need to say to make sense of your evolution. Just make sure you never shrink yourself to fit back into a version of life that almost killed your spirit. You didn't come this far to stay emotionally accessible to people who never made space for your needs. You didn't rebuild yourself piece by piece just to let someone else come in and pick which parts they like. You are not a buffet. You are not take what you need and leave. You are whole. You are full. And you are not obligated to make yourself palatable for people who choke on authenticity. If they miss you, they miss the parts they never really valued. Let that be their lesson, not your burden. Because here's the thing, when you finally learn how to weigh away from what isn't for you, your energy changes. You're calmer, you're clearer, you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop needing everyone to understand. You start building, creating, investing, not just in your future, but in your peace. And that energy, that quiet, confident energy, that's what people start to miss the most. Not the noise, not the effort, but the certainty you brought into every room. You were the grounding force, the stability, the standard. And when you go quiet, people feel unmoored. They try to recreate it, replicate it, find it somewhere else. But they can't. Because presence like yours doesn't come from charm or convenience. It comes from a depth they never took the time to understand. It comes from doing the work, internally, consistently, quietly. And that's the part most people overlook. They see the strength, but not the pain behind it. The boundaries, but not the betrayal that created them. The independence, but not the abandonment that shaped it. They don't see the nights you cried, the battles you fought alone, the moments you nearly gave up. They don't see what it cost you to become someone who now chooses peace over drama, clarity over confusion, solitude over shallow company. So when they miss you, they're missing something rare. Not just who you were to them, but who you had to become to survive. Let them. Let them feel the shift. Let them feel the stillness where your energy once lived. Let them ask themselves why they only saw your value once you were no longer giving it away. And you don't explain. You don't chase. You don't perform. You build. You build a life that no longer depends on being invited. A life that doesn't seek to be enough for people who were never even honest about what they wanted. You build the kind of life that others look at and say, how did they do it? Not realizing you did it by choosing yourself over and over again when it was the hardest thing to do. That kind of life? It's not loud. It's not flashy. But it is undeniable. And when people look back, they won't remember your exit. They'll remember the standard you set, They'll remember how you made them feel seen, safe, and challenged, sometimes all at once. They'll remember that you never needed to be the loudest to be the most powerful, that you never had to force respect. It arrived with you. And when your name comes up in rooms you're no longer in, it won't be about drama. It'll be about dignity, about the way you held yourself, about the fact that when you left, things were never quite the same. That's what real presence does. It lingers, it teaches, it transforms, and when it's gone, the absence becomes a mirror. Let them stand in that reflection. Let them process the impact in their own time. Let them feel the gap between what they thought you were and what you really gave. But don't you dare shrink just because your light made others squint. You're not too much, you're not too strong, you're not too clear. You're finally exactly who you were always meant to be. Let them miss that. Let them miss that. Let them miss the clarity that came with you. Let them miss the sense of direction they felt when your presence was near, the unspoken structure you brought, the invisible leadership they leaned on, the calm you carried even when everything was falling apart behind your eyes. They didn't notice when it was happening because they thought it was effortless for you. But now that you're gone, now that the air doesn't carry your steadying weight, they're noticing what it feels like to drift. Let them drift. You're not the anchor anymore. You were never supposed to be the gravity holding together people who never chose their own center. You were never meant to be the foundation for people who kept tearing down the walls and asking you to rebuild them. You did that. At work for too long, you poured into people, into places, into situations that never once poured back, and you called it loyalty. You called it strength. You called it being the better person. But now you call it what it really was, self-abandonment dressed up as love. There's nothing noble about draining yourself to keep others full. There's nothing admirable about hiding your pain just to be the strong one. The truth is, they didn't see your strength. They consumed it. They lived off it. And they took it for granted because it was always available, always steady, always there. They assumed it was endless. But now they're learning. Now they feel what it means when that consistency disappears. Now they're noticing the difference between attention and presence, between noise and weight. You weren't just nice to have. You were the thing that made it all function. You were the one who remembered the details, who anticipated the needs, who held the line even when you were breaking. And you never asked for anything in return. Not because you didn't want it, but because you'd already convinced yourself you wouldn't get it. That version of you, she's gone. Now you've stepped into a chapter where your energy has to be earned, where your time has to be honored, where your peace is not up for negotiation. And it's not because you're cold, it's because you finally healed enough to realize that self-respect isn't optional. It's the bare minimum. And anyone who doesn't recognize that isn't supposed to stay. So let them stay confused. Let them stay uncomfortable with the fact that the rules have changed. You're not playing the same game anymore. You're not proving, not performing, not pretending to be less just to make others feel more. You're not dimming your light because they can't handle the heat. You're shining unapologetically because you finally can. And here's the reality they're facing now. Your absence isn't passive, it's powerful. It forces reflection, it creates space. Space for them to confront what they ignored, space for them to realize what they dismissed, space for them to understand that you weren't just another person. They'll meet 1,000 people, but not another you. And when the world starts to feel a little more hollow, a little more chaotic, a little more shallow, they'll trace it back to you. But you won't be there. Because this season isn't about looking back. It's not about who misses you, who wants you back, who finally gets it. It's about who's walking beside you now, who's matching your energy without needing an explanation, who's bringing peace instead of chaos, clarity instead of confusion. It's about the life you're building now that you're no longer busy holding up everyone else's. You've done the work. You've sat with your shadows. You've healed the wounds they didn't even bother to acknowledge. And now you're stepping forward with more than just survival skills. You're stepping forward with wisdom, with discernment, with a sense of self that no longer wavers just because someone else doesn't know how to value it. You don't need to be missed to know your worth. You don't need a phone call or a text or a "you were right" to validate your decision to walk away. Growth doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes the only closure you get is your own peace. The silence after chaos, the calm after the storm, and that's enough. It has to be. Because waiting for people to validate your healing is a trap. Some people will never acknowledge what they did. Some will rewrite the story to make themselves the victim. Some will minimize your pain because it's easier than facing their own guilt. That's fine. Let them create their fiction, Dan. You don't need to argue with it. You don't need to correct their version of events. You have nothing to prove. The truth is steady, and you're standing on it now. And standing on truth doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see yourself. You stop begging for loyalty from people who wouldn't bleed for you. You stop justifying your boundaries. You stop tolerating confusion in the name of connection. You start choosing peace, even if it means solitude. And at first, it's quiet. That quiet can feel brutal, especially when you're used to the noise of being needed, when you're used to being the fixer, the listener, the one everyone turns to when their life falls apart. But eventually, that silence becomes sacred. It becomes the sound of your own voice again, the sound of your intuition getting stronger, the sound of your soul no longer being drowned out by other people's chaos. And once you hear that again, you don't unhear it. That's why you don't go back, even when the apologies come, even when the messages arrive, even when they say they miss you. Because you know they're not missing you. They're missing the version of you who was easier for them to access, to manipulate, to take for granted. That version no longer exists. Now you operate from clarity, from strength, from self-respect, and anyone who wants access to you now, they earn it. They show up. They bring truth. They bring value. And if they don't get in. That's not pride. That's protection. Because you finally understand that not everyone deserves proximity, that not every presence is a blessing, that some connections cost you too much, and walking away is the most powerful decision you can make. And when you do it right, when you walk away with grace, with your head high, without malice or manipulation, you don't leave a mess. You leave a mirror, one that reflects everything. None you gave and everything they couldn't give back. One that forces them to sit with their own choices, their own patterns, their own inability to rise to your level. Let them look, let them process, let them reach their own conclusions. You don't need to manage their emotions anymore. You don't need to teach them what they should have already known. You've got bigger things to focus on now, your purpose, your growth, your peace, because that's what happens when you stop trying to be unforgettable in someone else's story and start becoming undeniable in your own. You move differently. You speak with more intention. You don't argue. You observe. You don't chase. You attract. You don't compete. You align. You're not concerned with being liked. You're focused on being true. And truth doesn't always win you popularity, but it always wins you peace. So let them miss you. Let them miss the love that didn't ask for anything back. Let them miss the loyalty that stayed even when it wasn't deserved. Let them miss the stability that made their chaos bearable. Let them miss the grace, the presence, the strength they thought they'd always have access to. Let them. And keep building, keep rising, keep choosing the path that aligns with your highest self. Because you didn't come this far just to be remembered.